really need some best practices and how to iterate on those as well. Roland, take it away.
All right. Thank you so much, Patrick. Yeah, so I guess just to start off a little bit about how I ended up here. I am a three-time startup founder. I ran a web hosting business. I built a music application in the past, and then did a bunch of web development before I got tired of doing kind of the consulting gig and started a company called Olark, which was founded in 2009. We did live chat and customer service software. And through that, I actually met Purnima Vijayasankar, who has been a EIR at 500 in the past. She actually helped with some of Olark's initial marketing and product work. And when I left Olark, I guess 3 years ago now, it's still operating. It's basically a bootstrapped business. We got 40 people, 12,000 customers around the world. I needed to take a little break, partially for some personal reasons, but when I left Olark, I got reconnected with Purnima, who then in turn introduced me to Tanya here, who's who sadly just decided to leave the family at 500. Got reconnected with them. They're like, "Hey, do you want to be a mentor here at 500?" And I'd done some mentorship overseas in Bosnia and in Peru. I thought 500 is doing some really, really special stuff. It really puts the entrepreneur first, and I wanted to get involved. So that's kind of how I'm sitting here. I have been here for just over a year now. So yeah, Trafton, I think you had some questions.
Awesome, yeah. I'm Trafton Kenny. I'm the marketing manager here for the investor education team at 500, and super excited to talk to Roland today. And I'll be moderating the rest of the Q&A. So yeah, Roland, interesting to hear your background as a founder. I know that you started as a founder with Olark, and now you're kind of sitting on the other side of the table here. Can you talk a bit about how those perspectives are different?
They are very different. I hung out with Mike Maples of Floodgate Capital a few months back, and he was talking about how he thought that entrepreneurs made not so great investors because we tend the same qualities that it takes to kind of be crazy enough to start your own idea. You know, you've got to be almost insanely optimistic about certain things, and that same quality as a VC can be potentially a risk because you put yourself in the shoes of whatever team you're interviewing, whatever company you're evaluating, and you can be, like, oh, hey, I could do that. I could make that work. You become a little bit overly optimistic. So that's kind of a trap, I think, that you can fall into as an entrepreneur. At the same time, though, I think entrepreneurs are desperately looking for someone who sympathizes with their condition and can be kind of an advocate. And I think that's something that organizations like 500, that's a big piece of the value that they bring, right? I think this is especially important for seed stage, pre-seed, where you need to kind of, the companies need to align themselves with kind of a insider friend, someone who can help them navigate the maze of corporate partnerships and setting up their company and downstream VC. And I think that by aligning ourselves with entrepreneurs early, we actually get, you know, better deal flow and stuff through that, right? Because we are kind of seen as a friend through that whole process. We're not just there making all the cold hard decisions, which are important. You know, I'd argue that this doesn't really apply downstream as much. But for us, being early, becoming kind of the friend, is really important, and a piece of how we differentiate ourselves as a firm.
Yeah, it's an interesting point from Mike. I do feel like 500 seems to fly against that trend in the sense that we are staffed, I think, with a lot of former operators. And do you think it's different for accelerators versus VC firms, like that perspective?
I do. I mean, like I was saying, I think that it's more the. I mean, you need to be able to walk away from things, right? As a VC, I mean, like I said, for us, like being founder first is really is part of how we get our initial deal flow, right? Like founders talk, they see us as kind of guides through their company's journey.
Yeah, awesome. And I know it's been a really busy week. I think we're in the last week of applications for the Seed Accelerator. So I appreciate you taking the time to chat with us. I'd love, and since you're kind of in the middle of it right now, I'd love to hear more about, you know, your views on like 500's applicant process, you know, the interviews that you've been having recently. What does that look like? And then if you could also talk a bit about, you know, the 500's opportunity assessment. So, you know, what are the factors that go into making a decision on if someone gets a place in our accelerator program, and how do you weigh those factors against one another?
Yeah, great question. Yes, we are absolutely in the middle of things. The deadline closes tomorrow, and we're reviewing a few thousand applications. So everyone is completely swamped on the accelerator side. Our process is actually kind of changing. It has changed this past batch, where we're moving to more of a traditional, how a traditional VC would vet companies, where we've got essentially associates looking at applications first, kind of flagging things, and then they move up to our investment team. So things are getting looked at a few times. Essentially, we look at decks. We often pass back and forth a few quick questions just over email with companies, and then if they're not a definite no, then we get on the phone with them and do phone screens. And we really like to provide value back to the companies that are applying, and so the phone screen is a way for us to, you know, show that we can provide value to the companies applying. Even if they don't end up getting in, it's something that they can take back and implement. It also helps just like our reputation when we're doing that. So we don't take this mentality of, you know, just, you know, we're trying to like narrow down these companies. We're trying to provide value to a lot of people, because essentially that whole process is the whole point of our accelerator is of getting people to the accelerator is getting a group of companies in there that we can uniquely provide value to. I mean, that's, I guess, to continue on to Trafton's second part of the question was, what do we do to evaluate companies? And we're looking at the team, we're looking at timing, technology, and really like how can we get an unfair advantage as investors out of, you know, one or a few of those things. Like, what do we, are there weaknesses the company has that we are can in particular help them overcome? Because that is where, you know, we gain. That's where we gain an advantage in our investment. So obviously, you know, timing is that's just the way the world is. We do get some insight into whether the timing is correct because we see so many companies. We see kind of like clusters of related companies coming in, and we also work with corporates. So that having knowledge around, you know, all sorts of different companies who are kind of thinking about the same problem at the same time, that's a bit of a useful signal for us. And then on the corporate side, we can see sort of the same. And then we're also looking at, you know, is this the right team to do it? Do they have the skills already to pull it off? Do they have the drive? And if not, are they self-aware and coachable enough that we could help shape them to that? Because there's a lot of companies that come in who are obviously just not not coachable. We can't, you know, we're not going to be able to help them solve their problems, even though we like the timing and we like their business. We often say no. So that's important. And it is hard. It is hard to, you know, you can't change people, right? It's very difficult. So we don't force it if it doesn't make sense. Yeah. That's
yeah,
kind of
like coachability is one word I hear a lot of at 500. So
yeah, it is, but you can't like completely. Some of the absolute best companies are a little bit dicey on the coaching, right? So some of the, you know, someone who believes boldly in the, you know, state of the world, or is, you know, so driven, like sometimes those people are not the most coachable. But and we kind of make a call, right? So there's some exceptions where like we think that we can provide value in some other area, like our connections or something like that, that we can still kind of help this company along, even if they're not like 100% coachable. But we do not make exceptions if we think that person's going to be disruptive to the other things we have going on here. So that's the real red flag. And we do a lot of work to kind of vet people in advance. Like, we don't want jerks, you know, that hurts our reputation, and it's disruptive to the other companies that we have here. So that's kind of where we draw the line.
Interesting. Yeah, and so now we're at, you know, in San Francisco, you know, we've done more than 25 batches at this point. You know, you've been around for several of those batches, and you mentioned the program has gone through some changes recently. I'd love to hear more about, you know, structural changes to the program. It seems like, you know, more of a focus on kind of traditional, you know, VC style vetting, but you could talk a bit more about how the program has evolved, whether that's through like specialization or, you know, specific tracks. What are kind of some of the big picture changes that have happened?
Yeah, so one big change that's happening, we wanted to be able to make some better, like earlier team bets. And that means that we're kind of diversifying a little bit on the stage of company that we take in. And that requires being able to be a bit more nimble with our programming. So just this current batch, we're starting to implement a little bit more of a like modular. We're creating kind of like custom modules depending on kind of the makeup of the companies that we actually get into the batch. So we might have some people who are a little bit more specialized on product market fit, which is an area where 500 has not done too much in the past, right? We're traditionally much more focused on growth and sales, but we're going to be adjusting things so we can accommodate those people, and ultimately are experimenting with a bit more of a sort of rolling admissions situation that we're going to be like experimenting with. But it's really about being able to help companies that are at slightly different stages, and being able to say yes to companies like who need help now, right? Because timing, we have this artificially, our timing, just is around batches, but like that doesn't necessarily work for, exactly what help a particular company might need in that moment. So we're trying to be a little bit more flexible, and the idea is that we're going to be able to capture some better teams, better companies. We're going to be able to say yes to more people.
Got it.
That's the big change. Yeah.
And just to kind of drill down on tactics here, what are some you've had? I can't imagine how many conversations that you've had with founders this week and last week, but I think for the accelerator managers out here who are on this webinar, what are some of the tips that you can offer them when it comes to interviewing founders? You have such a short amount of time to kind of size up their business. What are some tips that you would offer?
Yeah. I mean, my real goal, and if you interview different people here at 500, you'll probably get some slightly different answers. We all have our different tactics. I really like to, I want the entrepreneur to show me that they know much more than I do around, about the space. So I try to get them to first kind of talk about how they first decided that they were going to tackle this problem, right? Get them to tell a little bit of a story. And oftentimes you have people who are going way too much detail around the specifics of their product. And in most cases, that's irrelevant for the initial call. They're going to want to talk about features, especially, if you are talking to a deep tech engineering team or someone who's really all about product. I want them to tell their story about how they discovered that this was a problem, and educate me about the space. That's really the most important thing. Because if they don't understand the space, it's really hard for us, they're quite often going to be struggling to do, early pre-market fit stuff during the program, and we just don't really have time. They're not going to be at a stage that we can really help them. So that's kind of the big thing I'm trying to do. I try to steer the conversation back towards the space and the customer problems. And then it's just asking, I tried to get hard numbers and specifics around the stage that they're at, because everyone is trying to kind of inflate that. I ask for specifics just so they can't fudge it, because everyone is like almost ready to sign, an MOU, or like almost ready to do some sort of proof of concept, or almost ready to do that. So you have to kind of force them to do, answer specifically so they can't fudge it. I guess one last thing is I want to understand, I want them to be honest about where their weaknesses lie. So that tells me a little bit about their coachability. It also just shows that they know how to like think about their business in the right way. So I will ask about their challenges and try to get a sense of how open they are. Honestly, like if they tell me more openly about more problems with their business, that's usually a positive for me. Like because there's always problems. If people are like, oh, everything's good, then they're lying to you. So that's really important because we can't help them if they hide their problems from us. Yeah.
Cool. So you mentioned that we have a team of analysts that are kind of sifting through these applications as kind of that first step.
Mm-hmm.
You're having conversations with folks. Can you talk a bit more about the big picture structure of the program? So what is the kind of a bird's eye view of that process, that interview process that all startups go through for our program?
I mean, we do initial vetting. We try to see if we can help the people, and the second step would be either second opinions. So we bring in people from the investment team. I'm sort of a special case. I also manage sort of a track inside our accelerator that's with General Motors. And so I'm also looking through, evaluating whether this company could be helped with an engagement with General Motors. So that's kind of the first step is just like, could there be a thing here? The second step, we get more in depth. We do like another longer video interview with people, and then we have a on-site workshop where we are providing value to the startups. We're actually like doing some education content, but the subtext to that is that we are trying to weed out the jerks and get a better sense of who the people really are, because that can be, if you get some bad actors in there, it can be very disruptive to everyone and your whole operation. So we do an on-site workshop.
That's a recent, is that right?
That is recent. We've done that, I guess, 2 times. Well, we've done on-site once. We're doing it again this batch. The past batch we did it virtual, which didn't work as well. We're going back to in person, and we basically have like, all of us strategically are walking around during this event, like interacting with people. We're all, we're comparing. We basically compare notes on the companies afterward, and that kind of gives us a sense of, who might be a good fit. And then it comes down to who's going to champion these companies. So we have a series of meetings where we're, doing basically arguing over stuff. Who is this going to be? The next big thing. What are the risks here? Do we think we've got downstream capital for them? Do we think that they're a good fit for perhaps a corporate we're working with? All those are factors, but it kind of comes down to someone championing the company, because we end up pairing the companies with someone from the investment team who's kind of shepherding them through all of the investment stuff, like for now and forever, and then we've got mentors that are going to be assigned, so who are working close with them, week to week, helping them with growth and all the problems that come their way. So you need people who are willing to commit to that company, and that's kind of ultimately how things get decided. Once we've kind of checked the boxes, done basic due diligence, and we do sometimes we go and talk to people in our network. You know, do we know about these founders? Like, are they legit? Have they done bad stuff in the past? Like, what do we think? Yeah, but it comes down to having a champion who's going to be their mentor and be their investment lead.
How important is consensus in that process? It seems to me like you're saying that, you know, it's important to have one champion, but, you know, consensus might not, you know, across the board of the investment team isn't necessarily the most important.
It's not, I mean, it shouldn't be important. Let me say that. And I think and the changes that are happening at 500 now are making it less and less so. So, because a lot of this stuff, you know, if you look at very successful companies today, a lot of them looked pretty messy and ugly at the seed and pre-seed stage. So they would be missed. You know, it's easy to say no in a consensus situation, and it's so you're kind of like, you're gonna, if you have to have complete consensus, you're probably gonna filter out the stuff that is, you know, maybe they've got a lot of potential, but they might have some key problems with their business. If those key problems are something that you might be able to fix, or one person thinks they can really fix them, you know, one person on the investment team, then it should go through, right? Like if you're just focused on consensus, you're gonna probably miss some of the bigger things. So yeah, I mean,
and zooming out, I think, you know, one question that we get at a lot of our programs, especially, you know, BAM, is around positioning of accelerators. So the two of us were talking before about the importance of specialization when it comes to running an accelerator. You know, you're having a lot of chats this week about, and I'm sure in some cases you need to sell 500 as an accelerator. You have a lot of these have tons of choices. So when you're talking and you're kind of pitching a startup on joining 500, you know, how does 500 differentiate themselves in this marketplace? And, you know, if you could also talk about the importance of specialization. It seems like an obvious point, I think, but why is that so important?
Yeah, specialization is everything. Or you could do a Heinlein quote and say specialization is for insects, but no, I mean, yes, companies now have many options, and they are looking for, there's usually a few keys they have to their business that are going to, I mean, keys or roadblocks that can be removed that are going to really propel their business forward. And so they're out there looking for partners who can help them with those roadblocks, the self-aware ones, right? Some of them don't quite understand that, and that's why we're also looking out to see if we can find people's blind spots, right? But when you've got good self-aware entrepreneurs out there with many options, they need to see that you have kind of the answer to their problems. And if you're too diversified in what you do or your messaging, they're going to be like, well, they probably can't be that good at that. And so, I mean, I was just talking to a company this morning. This was a situation where they were grilling me more than I was grilling them. Like, what can you do for me, right? And those are valid, good questions for a startup to be asking. And you know, this is a situation where you know, we have a lot to offer with our kind of corporate connections, General Motors and others, that would be good for them. You know, it's a question of timing largely. But you know, 500's really going all in on being a global accelerator. And so we have a vast network of people. You know, we have investment operations in countries around the world. And so any companies that are looking to go global have a lot to gain by working with us, because we've been doing this for a long time at a global scale, and we are more connected than anyone else out here. And so that's one big check mark. We are also known to be one of the better places to go to get like true deep mentorship and great content. Or other accelerators, I won't name them by names, that are more of just a stamp. And so good founders who really could go anywhere. The ones that choose us are really choosing to go with 500 because of lots of hands-on, good mentorship, and great programming. That said, we're pretty broad in terms of vertical, like overall, and we're positioning ourselves to be slightly more broad in terms of stage, and that's just because we believe that we can capture. We can get early investments in some companies that we would have missed otherwise by doing that. But we're maintaining the high levels of mentorship.
Yeah. So I think we've touched on filters, opportunity assessment. It's a pretty clear sense of our positioning, our value prop. I think that leads me to the question really of deal flow. I'd love to hear what you think has worked for sources of deal flow for 500 in the past. What hasn't worked. Would love to get your candid thoughts there.
Sure. The big thing, doing focused roadshows where we are providing value works really well. It's kind of a long game. You do work for a while. You go to a city and you interact with a bunch of people there, give a talk, provide value to all the people who are showing up. That without expecting anything in return, like that's the kind of stuff that builds up goodwill and builds up long-term deal flow. So that's one thing that works well, though it does take effort. What else do we do? Some of the partnerships, right? Working with GM and publicizing that helps bring in some deals. It's really, we do some, like reach out to people on angel list stuff. That can get large volumes of applicants, but really to get the highest quality people, there aren't big shortcuts other than getting out there, going to events, speaking at events, positioning yourself, right? This is where the specialization is important. Positioning yourself in those areas you go to, right? Especially if there's a city that is specialized in something, or and you position yourselves as experts in that area, and you can actually deliver some value. That's how you get the really good people. Because again, just reaching out, bulk reach outs to people on angel list doesn't necessarily yield all of the highest quality people. But sometimes it does, right? It gets some people on your radar, but you've got to get out there in the world to get the really good people.
Yeah, and it seems like it's about community building to me. Is what I hear when I hear that answer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because Um, we're a place where people come for advice, like even, you know, long after maybe their startup didn't work out, you know, we've got people coming back, both to mentors here, as well as kind of, we have a alumni community that's also quite active, and a mentor community that's for part-time mentors who also come in and help from time to time. So building those communities as a place where people are coming back, giving back. I mean, I think that's the real trick, is how do you incentivize people to give back to the community, and that's a real trick. Some of that is celebrating the people who do, giving them a platform, recognizing them, make sure they feel recognized for the help they're giving. Because often, you know, this is non-compensated help, right? Like, these people just out of the goodness of their hearts. You need to do everything you possibly can to make those people feel special and encourage them. Because otherwise, these communities, you know, especially online ones, will quickly devolve into people just coming there and only taking, right? Just asking questions. I mean, that's fine, you know, for us internally, you know, working closely with startup, you know, closely with the accelerator, like, we're fine just giving out advice, but to kind of multiply our efforts, with a larger community, we need to really help the champions in that community, feel special and feel rewarded, and help them out to keep those things going. So that's something we put effort into.
Yeah. Well, cool. I think, you know, before we open this up to audience questions, we did get several questions on a topic that I want to close with, which is really working with corporates. So, you know, I know that you have a bunch of experience. You talked about your work with PM. I'd love to get your thoughts on, you know, when it comes to startups interfacing with corporates and accelerators, you know, interfacing with corporates, you know, what works, what doesn't, and when it comes to setting up POCs, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well. And any tips that you can offer folks here.
Yeah, I hope these aren't too general. I mean, the real key here is to make sure that it's not a forced match, right? So, I mean, we have some corporate partnerships, right? Like, you don't want, it's not that hard to kind of like, bring corporates into the fold and you know, sell them on innovation and all that, but to actually deliver real value to everyone, you need to be really careful, with vetting people's goals. So what is the corporate trying to achieve? And when you've got a startup, you know, I work with startups who are, you know, developing a proof of concept for General Motors during the batch. Make sure that everyone is like 100% clear on what the goal is. What are they trying to prove? And part of what I do is I push back, like, is that really a requirement? Because there's often a very simple thing, you know, that should be proved for the first step. You know, it's just like, this is minimum viability here. And so you don't want people wasting a bunch of time. And the startups don't have any time to waste, right? So you really need to protect them from doing, you know, too much with the corporate. And you want to make sure that everyone is clear on what the goals are, that the right stakeholders are at the table, which can be a challenge on the corporate side. And making sure that, again, on both sides, that if that goal is achieved, is it getting people to the next step that they need to be, right? So if on the corporate side, like, okay, if the startup proves, this battery tech works or something, to this degree, is that something that the person in the corporate can then take and move to the next level, right? Move to a a larger paid pilot or something like that. So you need to kind of make sure that that person is connected to other gatekeepers and stakeholders, to make sure that yes, if we actually do achieve this goal, it's going to go somewhere. Because you'd be surprised, like, you can go through this exercise and then nothing still comes of it. And then on the startup side, tempering expectations, right? Like corporates, even with kind of an insider track, there's no guarantees, right? Even if they do everything right, like there's external factors that can affect the outcome, and then just make sure they really, like, is working with this corporate really strategically advantageous to them, because I think some startups at an early stage are just, they want to say yes to everything, and haven't really thought through where this gets them, right? Maybe it is a successful proof of concept, and even turns into something else, but it's taking them, it's making them pivot their product in a direction that just, doesn't really make sense for what they're ultimately trying to do. And so you've got to make sure that it's really the right path. And that's what I spend a lot of my time doing, is like pulling people back. Yeah.
Awesome.
I guess, yeah. One other thing is making sure corporates have understand the messiness of working with startups, right? And helping them temper egos and kind of be realistic about what's going to happen, and then also helping them get some of their processes that take normally months to do onto a startup time horizon where it can actually happen, because a few months in startup time is like an eternity, where that's nothing for a corporate.
Awesome. I think, thank you so much, Roland, for the time. I think with that, Patrick, we can open this up to audience questions.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much, Roland and Trafton. That was incredibly insightful. And I trust everyone now knows all there is to know about Accelerator best practices. However, if you're still craving info, now is the time to ask Roland your questions. Again, please submit your questions in the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen, and I'm going to start moderating them. I see a few have come in, and we will go ahead and get started then. This is from Hannah. So what kind of support do you see founders really needing after the Accelerator to continue working towards success? So what does 500 offer, kind of post-program, and what do you think are some must-haves?
It's largely around fundraising. And so our investment leads remain in touch with the companies, continuing to help navigate that process. So like basically everything to do with fundraising is something that we're very involved with after the program. On the other hand, a very different thing we offer is the general mentorship and almost I don't know, hesitate to say like startup therapy, but like we're there to help people through the inevitable difficult things that come up, right? Like they get, if fundraising is difficult, or if there are other roadblocks that people are running into, we're there to kind of unstick them and to motivate them, you know, when they're in darker moments, to keep them going. Again, that's where we're being really founder first as an accelerator is important, because they come to us with their problems, right? And I was mentioning before how we try to select for people who are aware or open about their problems, because those are the ones that are going to come to us later when there is something bad going on and we can help them with it, whether it be on the fundraising side or anything else, founder issues. Yeah.
Awesome. So this is from Jeremy. What kind of support do you offer to startups in different countries outside of the US, and how important do you think it is for an accelerator to provide support outside of their country?
Because we're a lot of our support, it doesn't matter where it is, right? You still have access to all the mentors. In terms of like country specific support, we can help people with fundraising because of our VC connections, you know, because we've got stuff happening in Thailand and other places, right? We can make some of those connections to downstream capital and to corporates. Other than that, we're not currently doing a ton. It's probably an area where we could do more community building, but it's not something we've done so far. Yeah.
Fair enough. And this is kind of a specific question from Odilo, and it's focusing in hardware startups. So based on 500's experience, can you talk a little bit about main points of pain and needs that hardware startups have during the program and afterwards?
Yeah, this is a tricky one. I mean, so 500 doesn't do a ton of hardware startups. We're starting to do a little bit more, partially because of like the GM partnership. A lot of them, I mean, they tend to have like heavier capital needs. So that's a big issue. A lot of them coming from like deep, you know, if this is a deep tech hardware startup, a lot of those founders haven't thought much about how they tell their story. And, you know, I mean, I'm being unfair and stereotypical of some engineers and stuff, but like we do run into people where they just they don't have the practice of telling their story, both to potential customers and to investors. And so that's something we do end up helping a ton with. Something 500 is very good at is helping them craft their story. You know, we're not as equipped to help with tough hardware engineering problems as some other very specialized hardware accelerators might be. So we have to take hardware companies that are a little bit further along for us to be able to provide them value, right? If they're still doing, you know, just bench prototypes, we are not currently set up to help them in a big way. With, you know, maybe a few exceptions, if we have a corporate that we can attach them to, that might be able to, you know, provide funding for a pilot and some additional expertise. But that's the rare exception at 500 right now.
Awesome. Well, I don't see any more questions, so I think that is all she wrote. And yeah, so we'll actually be sending out a recording of the webinar to all registered participants. So if you missed anything, please, actually a question did just come in. So let me actually address that. So this is kind of specific as well. So how do people get involved with 500 if they're interested in bringing an acceleration program to their region? Specifically, this is focused in South Africa. Who should they talk to?
Talk to Anna on our team, or can reach out to I don't know if people have my email, but I can make an intro if you are interested, and we can tell you more.
Awesome.
But we have a team dedicated to helping people build out ecosystems in the right way, because we've done it a bunch of times. So it's absolutely something we can help with.
Great, and we could definitely facilitate those intros. And yeah, so before we completely close out, I want to do another final plug for our bootcamp for Accelerator managers, which is coming up quickly. So if you are interested, please make sure to get your applications in ASAP. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at patrick.driscoll@500startups.com. The class is filling up quickly, so we only have a few seats left. So again, please try to do that as soon as possible. And with that, that's all I have. Thank you again so much to Roland and to Trafton. Roland, any final parting words before we completely end?
Live from New York. It's Saturday night. I'm in the New York conference room. Here we go.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks again.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
All right. Absolutely. Have a good one, everyone.